Okay, sorry about that. This is part two. If you missed part one, go to the very end of the video in the last 20 seconds and look in your top right hand corner and it'll go back to part one. As we go through part two and three, it'll continue to be part one in the top right hand corner, but part two is in the top left hand corner, like I always do my videos, if there's a part two and three and so on. And if there's not, I just pick one of the videos in the last month or the last 30 videos that I've put out that maybe I feel like needs a little more attention and I throw it onto there. Or if it correlates with it and has anything to do with it, I'll throw it on there. Anything like that. But anyhow, I was talking about the Book of the Dead and how it comes out of that, and realized all of a sudden it said, uh, hopefully you didn't hear any beeps. I didn't hear any beeps on this end, but you remember it used to beep. I think I've gotten the ability to turn that off, but the other problem is too, that doesn't warn me whenever I get low battery, and this thing drops from like 20% to turning off. It turns off like 7%. When you turn it back on, it goes, okay, I've got 6, 7%. And I don't know, maybe just this battery's gone to crap because I've uploaded too many times and, well, powered it up and down too many times. Anyhow, I don't want this to go on and on and on. I know I ramble too much. It's been a while, and so I'm a bit rusty, if you will, and I keep trying to pull in other things. And for some reason, I got it in my mind to explain, what really interested me about Egypt and what brought that in, and maybe give a sense of, some type of picture of what, whenever I was a kid, what I was going through studying this type of stuff. And I was like, one more thing about that though. Whenever I was a little kid, I was 4, and I already learned how to start writing my name and stuff with my mom. And there was this uh, Reader's Digest back in the day, and it was about Apollo. It was either TV Guide or Reader's Digest. I think it was Reader's Digest. And she had written some of the words on that on the back page and something else for me to learn the way they were spelled and to write them. Like, here's a pen, try to do it yourself, and write your name and all that stuff. And I got it down easy and wanted to learn my brother's name and stuff like that. But then on the front of that was the moon, and it had Apollo on it. And of course, that was the space, going to space, where they were doing right then. And there was somebody going on the way right then too. But I was kind of unaware until that she brought it all up to me. I focused on the TV whenever it started to come on shortly and things like that. But it was she also explained that he was a ancient Greek god, and I said, oh, like the one that we go to church, and she goes, well, no, but and did well, was I real? No, no. Well, did the Greeks think that he was real? Well, yeah, they did. And so I started to get into that too. But and that's kind of set me off. But I was way too young. But there was that idea that was on there, and then of course Apollo, and you just go from there. And it was in my face because there's the moon thing and there's Apollo, and they called it the Apollo. And then when I learned about the planets and stuff, they were all the Greek gods I've been trying to study about and everything. And I'm like, what? And then you find that little hints that all these people knew about this crap. And so I got the idea much later, coming into high school and so on, that a thing flashed in my mind that I said to my mom, like whenever I was 4, whenever I was deep in studies one time, and I said, what if it's all real? And that kind of echoed in my mind. What if it's all real, real, real? And I was like, man, whoa, because these connect, because this god is that god, and these are those, and so, and we're playing D&D and stuff, and I make it connect and everything off of it, but I could make that so much deeper. And I started going and just studying and doing or whatever, and then let somebody run it for a while so I could build up some stuff, and then it's my turn again. And we all remember where we were, but most of my campaigns were able to take pretty much anybody from anywhere and go anywhere. I knew where they were at pretty much with their characters, so I could take it and set it up for about that and go with it. But And I had a bunch of non-cohesive spots. It got to a certain point, they went to a portal and ended up in a whole new world, so we didn't get to have to deal with that anymore. Then I had to figure out how other way that was back. So that was really just me a way of wasting a bunch of shit that I couldn't connect before, just put it in a new world, right? But it comes across as interesting if you can do it right. Anyhow, regardless of those things that I've shared with you, we're going on. Yeah, I'm going to be a little more raw this year. I'm not going to cut out too much stuff. A lot of times I'd go back through. I took a gander at the last video and realized that I just rambled on there and towards the end, and luckily it kind of ended at the right moment there, but I wish I could have done one more sentence, actually two, to tell you to look in the top left hand corner. Here's the next part. But hopefully y'all are all here. And so part of the reason I rambled there at the first is to make sure everybody got from part 1 to part 2, because people quite often miss the first minute or two and stuff, and sometimes people don't sync up real well. I've done it myself, trying to sync up to something live and find I'm a minute and 42 seconds behind. People are talking about stuff that he starts talking about later, and anyhow, let's go. So we're talked about how they've given a spread of this from 1800 BC to 1550 BC, which is just 350 years, and well, it's 250 years. And if you were to stretch out the most that they believe that goes on this, it doesn't anywhere near 400 years worth of time. And the Hyksos are kicked out here, so it still doesn't work there. But the idea is that there's that 400, and really it's 430 whenever you get down to it, whenever they figure it out, so they didn't even tabulate it right. But 40 and 400 are sacred numbers for that Bible and everything that goes on there. It was the fourth set. But I'll get into that fourth set in a minute and talk about somebody else that was set right now as we go through this. The Hyksos practice horse burials. And these horse burials, yeah, it shows a picture. And this is something known of Aryan people and the people that brought horses to the rest of the world, for nobody else really had domesticated animals until the first waves of these Aryans had come back through and developed, and were in the middle of developing all of their things that went together with cattle and with grains. And there were some that did more grains and some that did more cattle. And people that did cattle ended up having to do grains and get them some place to eat, that there wasn't just running rampant. And that helped produce for them and the cows and so on. So it had an envelope effect. And then people that had it about half going on got with other people that had it about half going on, and they got it going on, and it seemed to all of a sudden envelope and got a whole lot more powerful than it ever was before. So they tell you it's found among many Indo-European, that's the special new way we say the word Aryans, and to others that they influenced, including Chinese and Turkish people and India. The act indicates the high value placed on horses in particular cultures and provided evidence of the migration of those people. Just a setup there. And their chief deity, their native storm god, and there are a lot of storm gods we've talked about through time. Here's a weather god or a storm god. You find different ones like Zeus, Baal Hadad, and everything else. And in a time where that part of the world started becoming a lot less rained on, you would have a people that would start believing in a storm god a whole lot more, especially whenever he ended up being a large, important factor to your well-being and your being able to subsist, right? So, but theirs was Baal Hadad, or Baal Hadad, and here we see the picture of him, and it's he's got that triple spike that goes on there, and it's not just a trident, it comes out the other side too, but it's a lightning effect. Now, all these gods that ran things at one time, including Neptune, Poseidon, could control earthquakes and lightning, make thunder in these situations. Of course, there's a lot of storms that come from the sea and so on. And so he had these controls over that and the waters and things, and that was real important, especially with these people that believe in this flood situation that goes on to everybody. You see in this picture, though, they tell you Hadad, Hadad, Ishkur, in Sumerian, it's named as Ishkur, was a storm god and rain god in the Canaanite and ancient Mesopotamian religions. You see these people's hats that are right below his feet there, and there's that little pointy hat that we were talking about, right? And there's more. Remember that pointy hat. I don't want to go to it just yet. Let's see if something else runs into it. Yeah, it does here just shortly, so why not? Anyhow, they associated their god with the Egyptian storm god and desert god Set, or Seth, right? And here he is with his aardvark type head, and I've done one about Seth already onto it. And what I didn't do, and was going to do during my off time right here, was do one on Typhon and the whole connecting, because I did one before and it cross-linked. I think that was one of the ones that cross-linked. I had 3 that I did do ready to upload. I had like 6, and 3 of those cross-linked. I had a 45-minute, I put it on and it said 26 minutes, and I was like, what? And then you try to make it work and it wouldn't work. And that's happened to me a few times, and I've realized not to cross-link onto the thing and try to push it all the way to the very end. Although I've been successful in pushing it all the way to the end, sometimes some of the other files before that get messed up. So I try to only do a little bitty series or a couple of them and send one up. I'm actually already uploading the other one while I'm charging, while I'm doing this one. Regardless of that, so in ancient Greek, the god's given name is Seth, right? But it looks like Enoch, right? Well, that's a different sound that's here, but Seth, that's your theta. Set had a positive role where he accompanies Ra on the solar boat, Repel Apep, the serpent of chaos, and a vital role as a combatant. And it's really just the yin and yang that makes it all happen. And the idea was that if he didn't do his thing, then the sun wouldn't cut up tomorrow. Well, what's he got to do? Well, they go through this fight deal, and then there's the Apep snake, and he saves everybody. And then the solar boat comes back up again on the other side. So it's really his companion in a way, and it's the yin and yang that makes it all happen, and kind of like the 2 brothers, right? And Sethites are known to be redheads, and Seti was a redhead and beloved of Seti and stuff. Also Ramses and the Rams, and how Rams is Aries, and Aries is for the age of Aryans, going around crazy helping everybody out for a second time, some of them their own people that the snake is going around biting to. Alright, now I'm not going to go real deep in time to lead off into that and Cro-Magnon things, but I have something definitely to say that's going to tie that all together. This is more about this, and if I don't get going, I won't get going. But Seth is hooked up to the god Typhon. Typhon is known to be a redhead. In fact, its original idea was that he was probably a volcanic god that they talked about, because eventually they trap him up under a mountain and he makes the rumbles, and when his hair burns, it's the lava, so he's got that bright red hair, so it is reminiscent of that, so that get put on him. Anyhow, the Hyksos, though, they say were a mixed people of mainly Semitic speaking origin, and that's not true, but mainly speaking they're going to go with that. By the way, putting the th and sh on words more than s on words, that is more Shemitic or Semitic, and that's where that comes from. And certain people have little things about their linguistics that key point some ways that you can find loan words. The Hyksos are generally held to have contained Hurrian and Indo-European elements. The Hurrians are the people of Upper Anatolia, which you can see here in this purple area, where it's basically the Urkesh is up here, not which is right down there, which is where Abraham is said to have come from, to the Sumerians. But they get pushed up and over after a while and blend back down in here. But it's told in a tale that's wrong of time. I've shown you whenever this flood actually happens that they have a story of, but that's the second time. For before they have that flood, they have this story of this other one, and it's from the time before. This is what makes Abraham leave and find other gods, which they say that whenever he leaves and goes here across into the west and runs into Canaanite lands and meets Melchizedek and whatever, that's the fact that they leave God, leave in search of another God. So the God that they were with, of creation that they had done and everything, blah, blah, blah. But of course later he says, I revealed myself to Abraham and Isaac as El Shaddai, but my real name's Yahweh or whatever. Often he says, what's your real name? And he goes, Yahweh, which basically in one termination means I am who I am, or just, I am the great I am. But it also, in a way, because of the way that Hebrew works, if you were to abbreviate it in a way, because he couldn't say I am because he isn't. So Ea, which Ea is actually Inky, but when you go back, instead of him saying Ea, you can't really say that. So he says he will be. But the last two, the VH or WH, is a woman. In fact, woman, right? The woman. Venus, the woman. It's more of that type of sound, and it goes with that more. So you have this, he will be as she was. And you find out El Shaddai was goddess of the breast, and that's it's Asherah in a way, and that's kind of like Ceres, and it's her goddess of grain and all this situation from elder times. And you're like, well, that didn't really have to do with those exact people. Later you come to find out it's actually a story of a bunch of people's lost ways of making it, and then they try to throw it in this weird situation, and it's not really talking about these one little people. And there was never a special little spot. That area was always owned by either the Greeks, or before that it was the Persians, and then it was the Egyptians, and just, now there wasn't ever a special island or something. Let me get on here, man. I've got like 2 sentences into this. The Hyksos are generally held to have contained Hurrian and Indo-European. So you have that Hurrian, but then Indo-European here, when you get, this is your Proto-Indo-European, Eurasian type people that are all up through that area at the time, that are said to have blonde and golden hair, most of which are described in the Iliad and the Odyssey as Ethiopians. Yeah, I've shown a bunch of times, and I don't want to go right now. If they had the word in front of me where you could pop it up there and it shows that map. But if you look up Herodotus's map, it'll show you all these brown areas on it. That's all the areas that they said were Ethiopians just in the Iliad and the Odyssey. And then they show you Herodotus having said that they lived there, that now they call Ethiopia, but that was called Abyssinia all the way up until just real recent times. In fact, it's kind of fishy that it's trying to be this weird inclusive thing. Those weren't the people there at the exact time. They're actually an admixed people anyhow, but we'll get on with it. So the Hyksos are generally held to have contained Hurrian, which is also Aryan, Proto-Indo-Europeans, and Indo-European, Proto-Indo-European elements, particularly among the leadership. And that's the way that it was. And they're giving citations here from books and Near Eastern studies and stuff, like stuff I've been doing for years. But they want to wanting to put Semites in it with Proto-Europeans. Well, the Proto-Europeans are supposed to be Japhethites instead of Shemites. And they're coming down and they're in Egypt, so now they're Hamites. All three of the Caucasians are blended all together. But yeah, well, somebody was supposed to dwell in the house of somebody and somebody. Well, if you check it out, that ain't the way it worked out, is it? No, that isn't. So it looks like that Japhethites went and dwelt in the house of Hamites. Or what? Anyhow, let me go. They'll say right here, though, this has, however, been vigorously opposed in some quarters, often for political reasons. And that'll explain a whole lot. And I find it hard to believe that this article is even in here, but this is new. Like, literally, I think this is since Christmas has been changed radically. For some of the things that I was saying, like I'm saying now, or in here. And I was having to put things in there. There's still already there's a couple of things where he goes, need citation, whenever he says something like, they were there before, they were this, but there's enough citations to choke a horse in this, every single one of them. That sibling, Oshwal, there's more than one in some places, being the Egyptian god Set and how it hooks up to, that's the Hyksos by Britannica, or the Egyptians' religions by Siegfried. So there's all this going on. And it gets deep. This is the header, people, and I'm going to try to go through this and just see if I can't be a little bit concise about going, but I don't want to get too fast and jumbly, and I don't want to feel like I'm leaving anything out. These Hyksos brought several technical innovations to Egypt, as well as cultural imports such as new musical instruments and foreign loan words. The change introduced include new techniques of bronze working and pottery, new breeds of animals like the horse and stuff, and new crops like emmer wheat and stuff that they had some of, but then other new crops. In warfare, they introduced the horse and chariot. So they didn't really have this before, and if you look into it, they had chariot type devices in Sumeria, but they only rented off of donkeys and oxen, and that's how they plowed their fields until they got horses, and horses became a conveyance, but they still didn't use them to plow the fields very much. It wasn't, it took 2 horsepower or 1 big cow, as long as it was pre-tilled before. Might take a couple of cows if it wasn't tilled before, but then we have to have a plow. And I'm not going to get into that right now. Man, I could go out in left field real quick, but I haven't got very far, so let's go. Horse and chariot. And what do they show on horse? Just the horse. Equus, okay. Been around 55 million years in some variation on a theme, but there's a chariot idea. It's right there. Now a chariot requires a wheel and an axle and all this stuff going on, but also in their earliest incarnations they were well adorned. The horse has already been domesticated. These people are already past farming and doing their things, and their time goes way back before the biblical time, unless we know that their timeline is messed up in some way. And it is in some ways. I've gone into that in a few other videos. Not going to do it now. Here we go. Sorry. The chariots, the composite bow. Man, I could take 5 minutes on each one of these. But the horn is kind of on the inside rim of it, and on the outside it has a laminate that's there with sinew on it and stuff, and it gives it a more flexible and a little more prong, but also the way that it's built recurved back on these very ends here, it's caused to be more tension, and all the way through the shot, i.e. right now it has already more tension on it, and so instead of it going it goes zah, and it throws it out there, and you can get at least 30% more distance and more punch out of that, and it takes something like a big longbow to even get close to it, and it still doesn't have the effect. And you can't really use a longbow where you're riding as well as you can something, and this short composite bow has even more thump to it and something that would be used. But Still got a wooden core on it, quite often made from yew wood and certain woods that go along with elves and stuff like that. I'll go into that in another video. They made improved battle axes, and while they had a hacking sword that had that weird swoosh in it that you've even seen in some movies, by the time these guys showed up, are you going to do that to me? By the time these guys show up, it looks kind of like this. And this is a different form of it, and believe me, I could go into my armory books here and talk for hours. This is a type of pretty much a spear. It's got the point on the end of it, and then what they call a bill, or a hook that's on the back of it. They have something like this. It's called a glove. They have a glove gasarum. They have all these different forms of what these are pole arms. But in this smaller pole arm, they have a huge blade on one side, and even the bill on one side, which you can thump into somebody's armor and yank them off a horse, or take it and poke it directly into them and stab it in the ground and lift somebody off a horse. But these aren't usually long enough if it's a battle axe. Well, there's some long glaive arms here, or 10-foot, 12-foot pole arms. This is, and that's more medieval times, before the time you get all the way up to that usually. But this has more of an axe blade and more of that half moon blade type that you see on it that's built in. I've got something that's going to relate to that shape there here too coming up in a video. You'll probably remember it. It'll be about 5 videos away, I think, at this point. That's if I get the other one done, and that's after this whole series. So they also gave them advanced fortification techniques and fighting techniques. In fact, they pretty much just waltz right in, and it was like magic to them. Even though Egypt had all this great magic, the power of the power of Hyksos was stronger. They rode in and they had these animals under control, which was pretty much like centaur people to this idea. They were riding these horses, doing these things, and because they could just run circles around you, shooting these badass arrows into you and stuff, it really going to work out too good long term trying to fight these people. And so it looks like it was pretty much a fall over. We'll get into that slightly as they talk about it. These cultural advances received from the Hyksos became a decisive factor in Egypt's later success in building an empire in the Middle East during the New Kingdom. So it's what stretched out their empire. In fact, they weren't going to make it much longer if these other people had this type of technology that was fixing to hit them from somewhere. And they walked in, and really they just pretty much hung out for a couple hundred years and ditched it back out as soon as the people threw a fit. But that was the Aryan way. They came in and helped you out and then left if you ever threw a fit. Let's continue, and we're going to go into all of these topics here. So this is the way the Hyksos looks, but some of the simpler ones has a little bit less than this. But if you'll look, it's something like you go over a mountain and there's a break or a river, and then a set of mountains are what they thought was a crown. And so they're thinking, okay, well, this is shepherd kings, so on, right? But in reality, Hakukasat means rulers of foreign lands. And if they were shepherd kings, that's just a byproduct. In fact, the idea of shepherd kings is even shown up in the great Josephus Flavius, the only other than the Bible really thing that we have from way back. One of the first ones, caught by Titus and stuff during the war that I told you ended up being Armageddon. He to a certain people, he wrote down that was actually the people, and that was Armageddon, that was Exodus, and he pointed it out. But people have come in since then and said, oh no, well, well, you're looking at the historian, the best source that we've got. But he also, if you'll look at his histories, exactly mimics Jesus's campaign with Titus's campaign going through, and there's about 26 references where they almost say things word for word, and it happens word for word in a strange way but one that you can correlate. If you start reading them back to back, read a couple of chapters, 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 you'll be like, or paragraphs even, you'll start to see connections to it. Read for a while till you hit one, and then go to the other one and read, and then go to the other one and read till you hit one, and you'll see it. I've made a video about it, but one of the best presentations I've seen on it was Flavian signature. After I put this thing out, and hey, I had 2 that he doesn't have in his video. Yeah, but he had like 5 I didn't have in my crap at all, and a couple of them are pretty cool catches too. But regardless, he shows that, and how its connection, and how the second coming leads to Titus, and Jesus Christ said 40 years at the Mount of Olives, and that's 73 AD, and that's exactly it. And it started in 66 AD, in the 6th month and the 6th day. And for those that have wisdom, count the number, and you'll be able to figure it all out. And everybody's supposed to figure it out, because it was going to help deify the next Flavian lineage as being a god, just like Caesar had been a god, just like the Egyptians were gods in their own way, deified. So, rulers of foreign lands. In Egyptian texts, such as the Turin King's List, describe the rulers of neighboring lands. The expression begins to appear in early as Old Kingdom of Egypt to refer to various Nubian chieftains, in the Middle Kingdom to refer to Semitic-speaking chieftains of Syria and Canaan, and also more to the east. A unique classification in ancient Greek language, the word Hyksos, with the rough breathing and the final grave accent on the omega, so the O, so that is hike or Hyksos, it's supposed to come across like that, is said. He goes, look, by whom? So there's a question on there. To derive from Egyptian, and by whom? Well, if you agree with everything before, Hykakasut, it said it's to derive from that. Ancient Greeks got it from this. That's the reason it doesn't come across as a common glutative or something, or in linguistics is that. It was used to the unique meaning of shepherd king by Manetho, and there's the ancient Greek, Manetho, a 3rd century BC priest and historian who wrote in Greek and knew the pre-Ptolemaic documents to support his histories. So, before Alexander the Great stuff. Until the decipherment of hieroglyphics, Manetho was the only available source for a list of the Egyptian kings. As a proof of its non-Greek origin, the word Hyksos does not observe the rules of ancient Greek accents, and is one of the few Greek words with a kappa followed by a sigma, and they say that all of them are loan words, and so it's KS, because they usually lose XI, which is like psi, right? Pronounced like KSI, psi. And what's weird is psi hooks up to a value of 60. That's the sacred Sumerian value. Psi was derived from the Phoenician letter Samek. Hope you've made connections from before when me talking about these other things, and then somebody to say that straight out, it'd be like, oh really? Yeah, really. And then its symbol looks like the half a railroad track we talked about, but that could be broken into arms going up and arms going down. Slightly different sound. Josephus, in his Against Apion, the 1st century AD historian Josephus debates that in his synchronism between the biblical account of Exodus, let me try to catch this just right for y'all. Not gonna be able to do it. Might want to go back and forth here, at least so it's big enough y'all might be able to read it. God, that's small. Josephus debates the synchronism between the biblical account of Exodus of the Israelites, that's going to be better if I just do it like that, from Egypt, and 2 Exodus-like events that the Egyptian historian Manetho apparently mentions, but they were small, so it doesn't work. It works with the Hyksos one. It is difficult to distinguish between what Manetho himself recounted and how Josephus or Apion interpreted him. Josephus identifies the Israelite exodus with the first exodus mentioned by Manetho, when some 480,000 Hyksos, or shepherd kings, also referred to as just shepherds, as kings, and as captive shepherds in his discussion of Manetho, left Egypt for Jerusalem. Knock, knock. Reality. The mention of Hyksos identifies this first exodus with the Hyksos period, 16th century BC. So that late. And if you look at my timeline on it, it shows where, well, Israel really didn't really show up. Well, a word showed up right before that in Egypt, but they say their seed is no more and they're screwed, right? Josephus provides the earliest recorded instance of the much repeated false etymology of the word Hyksos as a Hellenized form of the Egyptian phrase Heku Shasu, meaning the shepherd kings. And the Shasu, see if they show it here. Yeah, they got the Semitic speaking nomads in the southern Levant, late Bronze Age, early Iron Age, or third intermediate period of Egypt. They were organized in clans, tribal chieftains, right? Ashkelon. Scholars have only recently shown that the term derives from Hekakashe, meaning phrased rulers of foreign lands. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, you saw earlier the little crown effect there. That actually is like lands. And strangely enough, lands, what shows lands is mountains. And mountain ranges is what pretty much separates people, right? Unless you have a pass going through or something. Mountain ranges, and so you can say, well, my land and your land, and if they say da-da-da land, shepherds of the foreign lands, pretty much, that comes out easier to understand. But also, that's hieroglyphics, but the hieroglyphics of Sumeria and their early pictographs were also 3 knobs, right, that meant lands, right? And strangely, it works out the same thing in their phrasing. Like I've showed you so many connections, people have many connections, but they all had cuneiform and stuff, and so did these Hittites and stuff. And this is a triad going on here that people are like, oh, I don't know about these Hittites and these Hurrians and stuff. What's the deal there? Well, there was Japheth, right? Man, I gotta get going. I keep trying to go off into it though, but let's continue. Apion identifies a second exodus mentioned by Manetho when a renegade Egyptian priest called Osarseph led 800,000 leper, like having leprosy, to rebel against Egypt. Apion then conflates these with the biblical Exodus, and the reason that there's against Apion is because there's some things that he's refuting, and he's saying, no, it's the big one, not the little one that were these people, and these things were just a riling up to somebody else. Anyhow, and contrary to Manetho, says that this heretic priest changed his name to Moses. Many scholars do not, and there's Thuthmosis, which is basically Thoth Moses, and Moses means from the waters, and Moses was put in a reed basket, but that's really a tale of Sargon. So whenever they put this all together for people, they're supposed to have everybody around there go, yeah, I know about a reed basket story or something, and they go, yeah, that was them. It was them. Well, that ain't them, that's these people. That was the same people. Well, no, because these other people came in as the same people. Well, no, all right. Well, then there was these other people that came up from like Yemen area, and that used to be the same people. So Where am I at now? God, I'm hitting 40 minutes on this run too. So here's a picture of these Hyksos here. And they're being led into Egypt. And they got their kids and so on. But this is a faking of the wall. If you really look at it, there isn't that much different between the colors of the Egyptians and these Asiatics. But on the back of King Tut's, which I'm going to get to, on the back of his famous box that on one side shows him crushing Nubians, shows him fighting these people, they're not all the same color too as them. Because red ochre symbology and pale women are nobility, are priests, which is what these are designating, that they were the priest kings coming in, are shown as being pale. Like the woman here, and like what's cut off in this picture right here. And I've showed this before, and showed you people faking it with shopping too. But so people think, okay, well, this is them, and this is whenever those blue-eyed people came in to Egypt, and they must have been darker than the black-haired people. No, that red ochre symbology and pale women is in Minoans and Greek art and Etruscans and all kinds of people. The Mitanni that we'll talk about. Hopefully it hasn't gotten past here. No, I think it's coming up. And we're about to go to a part 3. And when we go to that part 3, it'll be in your top left-hand corner. And we're going to get into the Hyksos and where they came from and the reality of what I think really went on, as opposed to what you're led to believe, even when they're trying to tell you the truth. But before we go there, which is going to be in the top left-hand corner in a minute and show up, and after it does, you can click there. I'm going to do something real quick and show you that that wasn't whenever the first people got there that you think are what look like these blue-eyed type of people, because I've showed this in a couple of videos. But here is a special thing. This is an ancient Egyptian scribe from like the 5th dynasty, and he has these crystal eyes that are inset, but there's a slight socket there, and so it gives the reflection of like a real eye, and so you can look into the eyes of the people that founded the Egyptian dynasties and are coming right through the time of building the pyramids and founding it, and what they would have looked like. And there's about 14 of these total, and I've been corrected and said there's a couple more, but I can't find pictures of them because they're not out on the floor. But there are cats, even sacred cats, that have been done this way, and these are the eyes of Horaha. This is a depiction of the second pharaoh ever. They found it in a 12th dynasty tomb that had all these other things thrown into it, so this might have been a statue they had kept from that time all the way through them, and then put it in with them and everything. And it's weird, they get a grayish blue effect. While you see this one's kind of blue, this one's kind of gray, and they're still both kind of gray blue. Whenever you get around facing them head on, it's as blue as those other eyes were. And there's some that are slightly violet color, so on. So it's pretty neat. So yeah, and you can see the phenotype of that person and what founded ancient Egypt. In fact, pre-dynastic, we have Ginger. Ginger is the pre-dynastic Ghibelline mummy. See, we're at 34. I've got less than a minute left, but I'm going to go ahead and hit something real quick here. So here's what the Mitanni look like, and if you look, he's wearing a Phrygian cap, and you can see it looks very Greekish on that guy. And then here's a unicorn type situation. It doesn't have the Capricorn type tail on it either, but where that comes from, and of course it contains a horse. And I could read all this to you and everything, but let's not do that. Let's see, these are other pictures of Mitanni, but let's